Asked to have, in case we need it legal on the voting review, we're asked to have legal that. So, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first thing is the agenda. Approval of the agenda. So,
I have no problem with agenda on that. The fiber and executive session, why are we discussing that anymore? The fiber?
yes,
That should be in general.
not with this material we're discussing in it.
Well, when it came out and we had the committee, who would work on the fiber, they said it wasn't feasible to do. So why are we still discussing fiber?
At the last meeting, there was a request to ask some of the surrounding REMCs, like put them over the edge for doing fiber. So that request was answered, but their responses are not for everybody. They're for the board. Are there any other questions? There a motion to approve the agenda? Jason, second. Dale, in favor? Aye. Opposed? The agenda is approved. Okay. So now for your information, are there questions on that before we? Any of that?
I do have one. On the 10-year financial forecast, that's on the open action items. This would be for Brett or Jenny. That was delegated to Eric. Obviously, he's not here anymore. What's the plan to complete this? And are we currently using any services from Russ Shelby for the CFOs we did in the past when we had a vacancy?
So I can answer it. So since that was brought up, that was actually my action item. And all I wanted done was the cash flow to be updated for the 2018 to 2023 that was used to justify the rate increase. That was my action item.
So this question still stands.
To get cash flow, we would have to be able to update the entire 10-year forecast. To update the 10-year financial forecast, we need the accounting and finance manager here who was doing it was Eric. So the plan is as soon as we get one hired, this is going to be one of the first things they do. Obviously, we're going to have to do some training and that stuff first, and then he'll move into this.
So are we utilizing
No, we're
any
not.
services from Russ Shelby?
No.
We'll need that 10-year forecast before we do any kind of equity training or not?
Be nice, yeah. I mean, it's going to be our model that we can throw different things in.
Bill, did you have a question?
I did check register payment to Clara.
Claire's for our, the AMI system.
Is that what it says?
Other questions? Okay, then we'll move on to the safety minute. Cool moment, Brett?
So I'll start with the cool moment here. Two things kind of went on here. One is we hosted a high school students, I don't know, it was for the morning. And it was really a cool event. They got to come in, Brian Amrine and Pat Nobby, appreciate their help. They were able to answer questions. They actually climbed a pole and just showed these young guys like what it takes to be a lineman and was able to answer questions. I don't know, Rachel, you got anything to add to that? I thought it was a really cool experience.
It was building trades class seniors from Greensburg High School.
Next is our Operation Roundup. So if you saw that, we marketed it in the paper, try to get out there to the members of what those dollars for marketing or for Roundup are going to. Another cool thing we heard a lot of comments about. So reports actually on call to order as far as what dollars they gave. So that's a cool moment, safety minute. It's that time of season. Tonight, obviously, is probably one of the first ones. In case it would happen to be here earlier than when they're expecting, the main shelters that you would want to go to, you go out this door, you're going to take a left into the main office, and you'll see the women's restroom right there on the left. So that would be the first one. The second one would be the vaults. What I would suggest is if we get into a tornado situation, just follow us. But those are the routes to a shelter. Those are our safe places. So you never know when this stuff can occur. So I thought it was appropriate for a safety minute for us all to review the plan, and that's the map right there. But like I said, you basically just go out this door into the office. You'll hang a left there and you'll see the women's restroom.
Okay. Minutes from last month.
I would like to provide a correction. Page 2, last paragraph. It currently states there was a discussion about which directors read the resolution before the meeting. I would like that to specify all board members except Carl Riedemann and Suzanne Parmer were provided and had knowledge of the censor of Jeff Lawrence resolution prior to the meeting. I would like that to specify that Carl and I did not receive that prior to the meeting, please.
Fine with that if you are. Anything else? Okay, that's a motion to approve the minutes as amended. So moved. Dale, is there a second?
I'll second.
Suzanne, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved as amended. Okay, we're going to move on to the annual meeting voting review. First, I'm going to, since most of the board wasn't, or a large part of the board wasn't here when this change was initially made. Rachel, do you have a short
Sure.
history, or do you want me to cover it? I can cover it. Otherwise, I just saw your name on it, so I didn't ask you.
So,
Give me 1 second here.
okay. The review that we're going to go over was sent to the nominating committee and the board. Basically, 2015, 2016, the board had discussed and was exploring some different options for voting. There were some stipulations in the RNC Act that did not allow for proxy voting at that time. So we worked, we had some, can you go to the next slide first? Okay, so in late 16, we had district meetings throughout the territories. Through those meetings, we heard from members that they would also like to see some alternative voting options. And we explored those options. 2017, the RNC Act was changed by the state legislature. So that allowed for some different options for RNCs to enact early voting options, proxy. As part of the 2017 budget, the board at that time voted to adopt an alternative annual meeting process and election process using survey and ballot systems as our election management vendor. And then 28, so go back to that slide prior. These were the predicted outcomes that we suggested through this process. There would be various options to attract a more diverse member demographic. And you'll see in the next few slides that that has been achieved. The goal was to increase member engagement through new voting options. That has been achieved. Improve utilization of employee time and resources to be visionary leaders in our industry with our voting process. And the certified process ensures a more democratic election system for our members. I'll go back, there we go. 2018, we changed our bylaws to amend our voting and annual meeting process. This was approved by the board. And we continue to work through this new system for our election and annual meeting. So 2017 was our first year of a new annual meeting process. Can you go to the next? So here's our election history. In 2016 and 2017, our quorum, that's number of votes compared to our number of eligible voters. Our quorum was 11.3-ish%, 11.1% in 2017. And then, 2018 was the first year we enacted the new election process. And you can see the blue is the total vote percentage. The orange is paper ballots. The gray is online votes, and green is on-site ballots. So 2018, we jumped to 22% quorum. 2019, 24% quorum, and we had on-site voting options both of those years. You can see online voting increased both, year over year. And then 2020, obviously it was COVID, we had a different process. We still were using the same election process, survey and ballot. Early voting packets went out to all members. You can vote by paper, online. But we didn't have an on-site option because we did not have an on-site annual meeting in June. So online votes grew dramatically because that was, we didn't have on-site as an option. So still grew our votes. We're at 27% quorum currently. Next. This is the annual meeting survey data. So overall, you can see 2018 is blue, 2019 is orange, 2020 is green. Highly satisfied is on the left. Highly unsatisfied is on the right. So you can see overall, if you split it down the middle, the majority of folks are very satisfied with our voting process. Next slide. So this was the charge from the nominating committee when in reviewing this process, questions that we asked ourselves, or maybe you should ask yourself. Are we willing to sacrifice the consensus of our membership wants and needs? Are we willing to sacrifice member participation and convenience? Are we willing to sacrifice member diversity in voting? Are we willing to sacrifice our cooperative principle of a democratic process? So the recommendation based on the data is to continue with our current election process. It seems to be best for the overall membership moving forward. But that's what the data says.
Thank you, Rachel, for reviewing that with us. I appreciate that very much. Next, I'm going to invite the nominee. I'm sorry, I don't know who is all on the nominating committee that's here. Okay, just so I know, I knew there were some that aren't on it. So Kenny and the nominating committee, I know you guys wanted to present, so go ahead.
Sandy's going to speak.
Thank you. And thank you for that. Jeannie sent the email with basically the same data on that to us in February, and that is appreciated as well. We as a nominating committee feel like we are an integral part of the election process. We want fairness and transparency for our members. We are all working for the good of the cooperative and the member owners. We're all on the same team. I want to refer to Bylaws Section 3.06, specifically D and E. And I'm kind of a newbie here, so please help me if there's something that I don't understand, please help me understand. It states that the nominating committee duties are to count all ballots in any election and other voting matter with the assistance of the REMC employees and the other agents of the cooperative. I don't think that has happened the last couple of years. Go ahead.
On that, it's that last word, those last couple words you say.
Correct.
Would you read that, the last line one more time, or the last?
Oh, on the bylaws?
Yeah.
Okay.
With,
It says, with the assistance of REMC employees and other agents of the cooperative.
okay,
That was in the email that Jeannie sent.
but as soon
The same thing as well.
which one is it exactly? 3.06
3.06B.
Okay, there I found it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I might have been going too fast.
Well, no, I was just, when I read that, it's other agents, so you're not, as long as you're a part of that, it's not requiring you to count every single vote.
Let her finish.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just, no, she was making that question, so I'm going to respond now.
I appreciate that, that's fine. But I didn't say every single ballot,
Okay, I understand that.
but I appreciate, okay.
Okay, I just want to
So,
make sure I understand.
Okay, so the last time we had an election, they brought in the ballots and said, here's the results, sign these. From my understanding, the election committee was not allowed to count, I shouldn't say was not allowed, I'm sorry. They did not have the opportunity to count or verify anything in the election. So we feel like some of our duties have been, some of the duties that we feel obligated to do have been taken away from us. And we're not sure why. And because we weren't allowed to validate anything, and I say we, I wasn't on the committee at that time. They were not allowed to validate any of the votes as well. So we want to be able to do what is stated in the bylaws, and we would like to be able to accomplish what the members elected us to do.
Okay.
You look so confused.
I'm still, go on, please.
Just some simple recommendations, if I may. And if you have questions, please ask. Meet with the election committee in the fall to discuss the upcoming election and how things are going. What do we need to do? Things like that. Receive updates leading up to the annual meeting and election, and be able to verify the votes and results prior to public access. And we ask that because we are asked to sign those
I get that.
election results.
One thing we didn't go over in this presentation we had tonight, but that it was provided in the packet that we gave you guys, is that SBS, one benefit of going with SBS is they are a certified voting entity. They've been doing it for 30 years, and there's certifications that you got to go through to have a certified voting process. It's all automated, the machines are all valid.
Right, yes.
So I guess my point is the reason they didn't bring back the votes is because they go through this process and they don't want, I would suppose, like votes go all over the place.
Okay.
That's kind of why that process is set like
Okay.
it.
So may I ask, why or how this firm was chosen over doing like Survey Monkey, which is pretty easy to set up.
Survey Monkey is not a certified balloting process for voting, number one. We did, so originally when Rachel took a look at, because there's several voting entities just like Survey and Ballot, right? So this last year, Rachel had met with our peers and they kind of went through and evaluated what those look like and the pros and the cons to each of the different places, because cost-wise, they're not that far off, right? The majority, and we landed on SBC because they do have it. I mean, they have 30 years of experience. That's the main.
And that was stated in the email.
And the other nice thing about them, Sandy, is we've used them for 3 years. So we would we've had literally pretty flawless process. I mean, that's one thing you see in our members are telling us this process is working. And so we hated to move away from them this year when we had the opportunity to go to it with a different company just because of it's flawless. That first year we did this, it was literally, there was hardly any hiccups whatsoever.
Okay. So if I can ask a question, do you feel like these recommendations are doable?
I'd have to look into them as far as, and it depends on, we'll have to figure out like validating. Are you wanting to see every individual vote? Are you wanting to see, what are you wanting to see in validating and seeing votes?
I don't know because I don't know what you have. And like, Marilyn, can you help? You've counted. I have not done this.
Well, last year, we met at 6:30 and it was virtual, of course.
Right.
And Lickens read every vote, but we did not have a paper in front of us. So by the time he got finished reading all the votes for each nominating committee, their persons and the board, we had to sign the paper. So of course, 2 of us were looking at the paper for the board and 2 were looking at for the nominating. Well, by the time we got done, we had to hurry up and sign, and some of us didn't even hardly get to, and I think you can probably vouch because we were there. I didn't get through the whole, either of the 2 pages.
Oh.
So I couldn't verify, but we had to sign because
Well,
it's time to go virtual.
I would definitely think that we should be able to work it out that you can get those results sooner.
But we each should have had a piece of paper, so I
Well,
thought, while he was reading, instead of just reading that.
I'm not involved in that process. That is something I think we could probably.
Marilyn, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
This was your first year, right?
No,
No. So when we did some in-person voting before the
see,
pandemic.
that was when I came on that first year, and that was at the.
So Dennis, were you here when we did some in-person?
30 years ago was on it. We counted every vote.
Right, but I mean, when we had the switch from the year when we had a multitude of different ways for people to vote. We still had some in-person voting and you guys handled all those.
Yeah, that was.
That would have been the year before.
Fairgrounds.
So that process, what do you think about that process? I mean, I'm hearing about this from last year because we didn't have in-person voting. It was all different.
Right.
So you got the paper, here's the votes, sign off on it. But I'm talking about the year before. Was that process okay?
I was not involved in that because that's when I voted on the board.
He was.
Yes.
What do you think about that process?
I got some other statements I want to make. I want to talk a few minutes. So, and then maybe we can carry on our discussion about that in a little bit.
Okay, I want to ask, were either of you guys on it before?
It's my first year.
First year on it? Okay. You were numbing also?
30 years ago.
Oh, 38, sorry. So
Online voting.
I'm just trying to figure out okay.
What's that?
A different one.
We just feel like we need to be more involved. I mean, we have no clue what's going on. You know, we just get this piece of paper, hurry up and sign it, and off we go.
The other ask that you had was a fall meeting. Can't you guys call your own meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's doable.
Right.
And then you asked for an update.
We
I mean,
wanted to meet with the election committee just to make sure we're all doing everything.
Who's the
together.
election committee?
It's the board members minus
The one that's up for running.
Election committee is the nominating committee and the attorney and the accounting and finance.
And the board member's not up for current election. That's what our bylaws say.
Yeah, it's the board.
So we could call that meeting. That's not a, that would be easy.
Well, obviously I wasn't at the meeting. Sandy, I don't think you or Marilyn, you apparently weren't at the meeting.
Yes.
I would never suggest that data that you are being asked to certify should be shoved in front of you and signed without your ability to review it and or ask questions. If that's the process we have in place, that needs to be changed.
It does.
That should, I will not support that. That being said, the certification process by SBS, coming from an accounting world, I understand the statistical evaluation and the validation process. And there's a lot more sophistication that goes into that in validating and authenticating an election and counting things than just saying check 1, check 2, check 3.
Right.
There's statistical analysis. There's a lot more detailed information in that. So while we're talking about exploring using them versus not using them, I believe, that's an altogether different thing. But I would never suggest nor support that nominating committee members should be said, here's what we did. You don't have any chance to review it or ask any questions. Please sign, because that's your obligated thing.
Can I make a comment? With part of the resolution, Babe, after hearing you speak, Sandy, is that the nominating committee deal directly with SBS as the nominating committee. Do you feel like there's a missing link between you and the SBS, or how much dealing did you have with that last year? I don't know.
We had 0. We can't even see the
So
contract.
can the nominating committee be the ones directly to deal with the SBS since it's certified, and leave the other ones, as assistants only, and have the nominating committee take control of that part of the aspect? I mean, that might be a bridge to a little bit of everything instead of reinventing the wheel, direct it a different direction.
That would be a question. We do have Aaron online. I don't know if you know an answer.
Sure, I can respond to that for a minute. There's certainly a potential for the nominating committee to interact with survey and ballot systems in a number of ways. It sounds like to me, listening to the concerns that have been raised, that part of it is just wanting to understand the process and then have a chance to ask questions about the process and also the results. And so that would be an appropriate contact between the nominating committee and survey and ballot systems. And obviously you'd want to have that set up before the day of the annual meeting. But in terms of interacting with survey and ballot systems to make policy decisions about how the election will be conducted, that is a board function, and that's the board's responsibility to actually set the policy, make the decisions about the process. That's for the board to do. But certainly, I think having interaction with the nominating committee to resolve questions would be very appropriate.
But the bylaws says that that the nominating committee conduct the election, including the registration, ballots, and the voting procedures with the approval of the credential committee, which is the directors minus the 3 that's running.
Where does it say that?
Yes. That's in 3.07.
Well, that is not the nominating committee. That is members of the board of directors that have all of those responsibilities. So I agree with you. The directors have those responsibilities.
They have, it sounds to me like that we do the manner, including the registration, the ballots and voting. We suggest it, and then if you don't like our suggestions, you don't approve it.
Well, I read it very differently than that. I think that the nominating committee does not have any of those duties officially, but that doesn't mean that the board isn't interested in hearing what the nominating committee has to say about the process. I think, the board is going to take input from its members and the nominating committee and staff and consider all of that information when it ultimately makes those policy decisions about how to conduct the election.
I don't know. She breaks up so much. What did she say?
Do I need to repeat all of that? Brett or Michael? Jeannie or Steve, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Aaron.
Okay, thank you. I can hear you, Jeannie.
I've lost the connection with them.
Yeah, same. I don't see them or hear them. I don't know if you're looking on a video, but their video went
It's
down
just
as well.
spinning. Yeah, I can just see it spinning. I can send a text to Brett.
Well, I would imagine that they know that they're down.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe. I mean, I was going to do that.
Oh, here we go. Maybe they're back.
Hopefully it wasn't the severe weather.
I was thinking the same thing, but I only live about 5 miles away and it's not even raining here. So hopefully they'll be able to reconnect soon.
Jenny and Aaron and Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been on too, but I can't hear anything.
And when I was speaking at the end, right before they sort of apparently lost connection, could you guys hear what I was saying?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was pretty brilliant, and then now I'm gonna have to remember what I said. All right, well, anyway, going back on mute.
We have 6,500 REMC members.
Yes,
Okay, we don't even have a third of the people voting.
correct. But before we started using them, we only had
600.
600.
Yes, but in 3 years' time, we haven't even doubled what we were.
Double.
We went double.
On that
It
graph.
was like 900 when we was at high school. It was like 900 when we was at high school.
600.
600.
Here's the number.
Okay, I can't.
I think the big part of it is we just want to be able to validate the ballots that are coming in.
Right.
We want to be able to count those ballots and see the data that's being produced by SBS.
Okay.
And be able to validate that.
Right. And I get that. But I'm,
Got the problem with that.
I don't that's completely at all.
Asked last month.
That is, I totally get that. I agree with you.
I missed the meeting in between there, so that's my opinion. That's what
Yeah.
I believe their discussion's a bit about.
Okay.
Last month it was, we were going to get rid of the online completely and basically go back to paper ballots and the nominating committee was going to,
That is my
that's
understanding.
what we've been doing research on, right?
That was my understanding from last month.
And mine as well. But was that not the impression that we got?
Well, as a nominating committee, we have been having discussions.
Okay, but my question is, Kenny, when we left last month's meeting, was it not a distinct impression that your desire was to do away with online?
We were exploring possibilities. We had nothing etched in stone, but as a nominating committee, we want to be more involved. And we would like to do the communication with SBS. We would like to, I don't see any reason why, as a nominating committee, we shouldn't have that responsibility.
And as I read the 3.06D that was on there, count all ballots in any election and other voting matters with assistance. Now, if they need assistance, they should be the one asking for the assistance.
Not being a paper slip for them to say here certified. That's what I believe the law is.
And I said that earlier, that I don't believe is appropriate. And I don't want to speak for other members of the board, but I wasn't there. But if that's the way it was done, I believe that to be inappropriate. I would not want to be in a position of whether I'm on the nominating committee and suggested that I need to sign this because it's put in front of me. But I wasn't there.
Rachel does. I'll let Rachel.
So currently, I serve as the liaison between survey and ballot systems and Decatur County REMC. I'm just sharing how the process goes. So they were selected, voted by the board. So when the election season begins, we have, a schedule that we need to achieve to get to where we're going to have an election ballot packet sent to every member. So we have, a very detailed schedule of when we need to have information about candidates, bios, pictures to SBS. They compile the packet, send it back to me for approval. We're creating mailing labels, BREs, business reply envelopes, all of the detailed nitty gritty paperwork type design information. Then they, send me a proof. I proofread it. I share it with the team to proofread to make sure everything is correct as humanly possible. So then the election packet is mailed. So this also is integrated with our NISC system. So IT is working to, make sure we have everything updated to our billing system, validating our member list. So we integrate the member list with SBS, barcodes. The packet is sent. So you are aware, we don't receive any election information prior to what the nominating committee receives. I have no idea who is winning an election. I have no idea what the votes look like. No one knows anything. That part of the third party process is to ensure that there is no tampering of election information. So I get a daily report, and I would be happy to share that daily participation report with the nominating committee. So when the election opens, we run it for 30 days prior to the event. Every day I receive an election daily participation report. Today we received 300 votes by mail, 25 by online. Every day I get that report, and I'd be happy to share that information, but I never see who's voting for who. I don't see the member list of who's voted. That information through this process is kept confidential for a reason. So all of the election totals are then totaled by survey and ballot, sent to the attorney's office. So the election ends 2 days prior to the annual meeting. That process is cut off. The data is compiled, validated through survey and ballots system. They have they have to meet certain requirements. Then the report is sent to Wickens' office. Wickens does not open the information until he gets here in front of the election or the nominating committee. And then that information is shared with the nominating committee. And you all get the report. There is a binder of information that you see. You can see how many votes for each candidate in each district. And then you read it and you sign your name that you are validating that this was a secure, validated election process. And that's what you are signing, agreeing to.
So the question, I guess, is what would the nominating committee do with SBS? I don't understand, I guess, what task would you be doing? I don't think anything she said, a nominating committee, completely agree you should get the information before you're getting it. I think that's a pretty simple change.
Right.
I have no idea what you would do with SBS. I mean, the membership list, scanning, getting that to them early on, validating of the proof. I have no idea what the nominating committee would be doing with SBS. I don't understand that.
So Kenny, are you the president of the nominating committee?
No,
The president here?
yes, Dennis.
Dennis is, just so I'm clear, again, I want clarity. When we left last month's meeting, I had the distinct impression that the nominating committee was desirous to do away with online electronic voting. As we sit here tonight, is that your position? Is that a goal of the committee? Or can we just remove that from all of these discussions and say that's not anything that you're wanting to entertain?
I wasn't at the meeting last month or didn't participate, but we don't want to do away with that.
Okay, so the nominating committee,
Sandy and I participated in it, and yes, at that time, we left you with that impression. But we have amongst us decided that maybe we would like to, but we wanted to explore other possibilities, maybe besides SBS, like bring it home locally. Marilyn's done some things. She talked about that Survey Monkey or whatever, and you said it's not certifiable. I know things change fast in this world. And, you look at the apps on the phones and how things change. I can't hardly imagine that if they're doing things like that, they can't be very far away from being certifiable, or there's not other things. We just like to see things brought closer to home. I appreciate what you do in that way. And I guess the daily reports, I know I've sit through meetings and you've talked about, well, they're having a pretty good turnout and they receive things like that. I guess part of me did not know how in-depth the information you were getting. But I would still think, as the nominating committee, we would like to be more involved in this election process. We would like to, I think we have that right to be able to see that contract, to see if there's any way. There's several of us on this committee, and I think it would only be right. Maybe there is suggestions or questions that we do have that might bring up. I don't know what the big deal is. I realize you're third party and so forth, but there's 8 of us on this committee. It's not like we're opening it up to the world. I think as a nominating committee, we ought to have the right to see this.
I think it's a nominating committee. You're exactly right. That's not going to be a problem if the idea, I mean, it's a decision.
I've asked you for 3 or 4 weeks to see this, and
I would just like to know what task you guys are, because she just explained the process, Kenny. So you guys want to get.
I understand that. I listened to that process, and I'm impressed. She does a good job, but I still think the nominating committee there ought to be something more that we can do to follow these bylaws and validate the process.
I'm sorry to be hammering on this, and I understand whether it's SBS, Survey Monkey, chalkboards, I don't care, whatever. I'm not concerned about the methodology. I'm trying to understand that last month when I left this meeting, I understood that the nominating committee was desirous to do away with online voting. As we sit here tonight, forget SBS, forget Survey Monkey. Is that what the nominating committee?
No, I thought I just put that to rest a few minutes ago. We have met and decided that's not what we want. I thought I just put that to rest. No, we're not wanting to do away with that, but we would like to be more involved in what's going on.
I agree.
Dennis, would it be appropriate to suggest a meeting of the selection committee to get this worked out? I don't think that this is really that dramatic and it doesn't seem like it's that far away. That would include directors, Jeff, Suzanne, Carl, myself, Steve, and you all.
I mean, we can get the documentation that has their entire process, I think, pretty easy.
Would that be agreeable to have a meeting and get this?
We'll be able to do nothing for this year though, will we? Time frame.
We will be able to understand what's going on.
I would suggest that at that meeting, a representative from SBS be there to explain the process and go through that and talk with you guys, answer your questions. I don't know anything about the process either. That'd be fun.
Personally, I think she did a very good job explaining everything.
In the time I've been, I'm sorry, Cindy.
Go ahead, finish.
In the time I've been a director, which is approaching 3 years, the one thing I've said about this co-op is the fact that there are passionate people. And it is evidenced by your attendance and by your vigor that you're passionate about that. First of all, I want to say thank you for that. I applaud that. And I'm grateful that you have that commitment. As I said earlier, you should never be asked to sign something that you don't have the ability to review it. If that's the issue, I think Jason's suggestion can go a long way in getting this issue resolved. Because when I walked out of here last month, the fact, considering to do away with online voting, I'm going, man, that's probably not something I can support. But if that issue is now removed from what I just heard, I think there's common ground we can get to here that allows us to maintain the relationships we have and provide information that I think theoretically you're charged with doing.
There's probably some duties that you guys are doing that we would like to do.
If there,
If it's sense, go ahead.
can I say something, Michael? It's just an honor.
Why not at this point?
You know, we just went through a national election. We all doubt what went on. If I could have counted those one at a time, I'd have a lot more confidence. And now as an owner, I'm speaking of, I've seen it on the national level fail, and whether they be certified or not, I have doubt in. Maybe it didn't fail, but there's a lot of doubt. And how do you doubt when you count the paper ballots?
Yes, Suzanne?
I take what my combination of friends, family, like all of us have REMC, friends, family, clients, and I take to heart what they tell me and I ask their opinions 100%. And I've discussed the last month regarding voting and process and those who attend, who don't attend. And I do appreciate the nominating committee, not just sitting back and showing up to the annual meeting and signing and say, I'll sign it, whatever, I'm not, so I do appreciate that. And I think those bylaws do need to be followed, the 3.06 and 07, that the nominating committee does need to be responsible. And whatever they want to be involved in, let them be involved. That's why they're doing it. Also with that, after discussed with several members, I'm going to make a motion for the $10 bill credit per member vote, along with the voters like they had in past years. So I would like to make a motion for a $10 bill credit per member vote, and then to abide by those current RMC 3.06 and 3.07 regarding the voting process. And that's just based on every single person I've talked to. And every person I've talked to, whether it's just the people I've talked to, they did the mail-in ballots. So I don't know if it's just online was new last year or just a lot of my people are just old school that have voted. But the ones that didn't vote, they were talking about incentive to vote. And that's why basically their incentives, the olden days with the bill credits, even the $10 was an incentive. So I would like that, make the motion to do a $10 bill credit for this year's members vote for member.
I'll second that.
Is there discussion on this?
I just clarity. Is that regardless of how you vote?
Regardless of how you vote,
Um,
which would be $17,000 based on last year's.
I am going to have to ask for legal on this one for the voting.
Well, here's some historical data. We offered a bill credit for attending the meeting and for voting in 2018.
In 28, the year I was elected, we were
The
off.
first year that we changed the process.
And then I know when I got elected, we switched that.
So we did not offer a bill credit for voting in 2019 or 2020, but we continue to increase voter participation.
So we're increasing the voting.
We are offering a bill credit which is what we did
For
years prior, 69 years prior. We offered a bill credit to come to the meeting at the Greensburg Auditorium. You could register and vote and walk away and not stay for the meeting and get your bill credit. In 2018, we allowed people who voted either early or at the meeting, a $10 bill credit. And if you attended at the fairgrounds and registered, you got a $10 bill credit. So that equaled the $20 bill credit that we had given for years prior. In 2019, we offered a $10 bill credit only for attending the meeting. So it was less than what it had been in the past. In 2020, we offered a $10 bill credit at the drive-through event in October, not in June, nothing in June. So voting continued to increase in 2019 and 2020.
My only input on that was in the 2019 election, we voted as members, we voted to remove what we saw as paying members to vote. Okay, we didn't think it was right to pay members to vote at that time. So we removed that. We thought it was right to encourage members to attend the annual meeting, give a bill credit, but we removed the paying for a vote. We just felt like it was inappropriate to pay members to vote.
I'm just communicating what people have communicated to me as a vote for me as their district. I'm their voice. That's what they're telling me. So I wanted to make that motion because that's what they've communicated to me. I'm just communicating what they've asked me to.
I also, before any voting, you requested that only the 5 board members who are not up for election vote on this. Is that correct? I would like Aaron's interpretation of that. That would be 3.07.
Yeah, I think that you either need to convene a credentials and election committee, needs to meet and deliberate and discuss things. And my understanding, but please correct me, my understanding is for the last number of years, several years, the board has not really convened credentials and election committee, and the board has basically made decisions as a board. And first of all, I would point out that this board has authority to amend the bylaws, and ultimately you all have, as a board, the authority to make these policy decisions. Now, depending on what policy decisions you make, it might require amending the bylaws. But ultimately, you, 8 board members, have the responsibility and the role to make these policy decisions. So with that said, if you're looking to really go by the book this year, then you should convene a credentials and elections committee to discuss things. I think that I answered your question, Michael, but if I didn't, please let me know.
So you are saying that this should be voted on in the credentials and in that specific meeting, or that's what I'm asking. Sure, can't we have discussion now and vote?
Technically, that is what your bylaws say.
Okay.
So we can vote on it?
So
we can vote on it?
Well, it's a board decision, is what she's saying technically. So depends if you want to be a stickler for the bylaws or not.
I think we want to be a stickler for the bylaws.
Then we have to have a credential and election committee meeting to vote on this. We just add it to the budget.
Suzanne, I ask you, how do you feel about, because I'm not for paying for votes. We did that. I didn't like that. It kind of goes against good governance that we're striving for, I feel like. The reason that it got split out, the 10 and 10, was because we paid $20 if we came to the meeting. So that's how we split it out, $10 vote, $10 come to the meeting. What if it was just back to the $20 to come to the meeting? And we're not paying per vote.
I'm just communicating because a lot of times Friday night in the month of June is just not real convenient. So I'm just communicating what all the members I've just asked, what would make you vote? Why don't you vote? Why didn't you vote last year? We have 1,700 out of 65 members voting. It's still not, I know we're excited that the numbers have gone up, but they're still not good. They're not. So I'm just communicating, and I told them I would make the motion.
But part 2 of that is I would want members who care enough about the co-op to actually vote and not have to be paid. Those are the people that should be making decisions, not people that are clicking a button on the computer so they get $10. That's my issue with it.
I'm making a motion, what I've been asked to make the motion on with the people that I deal with.
Okay, then I'm asking you, do you want me to be a stickler with the bylaws or not?
So when I'm not sure exactly how to answer that, Michael. They're the bylaws.
Huh?
They're the bylaws.
And according to the bylaws, we were just told that would have to happen in that meeting.
It doesn't have to have a separate meeting. We're all here now. It doesn't say it has to be a separate meeting on a separate date. We're here now.
Nominating committee here. Doesn't all the nominating committee have to be present for that committee to convene?
I have no idea.
It doesn't say 100% attendance.
It's been seconded.
It doesn't say 100% attendance.
Well,
let me jump in here. If you're going to only allow certain members of the board to vote on this matter because you're interpreting section 3.7, then you need to convene a separate meeting. If you would like the whole board to vote on this, and the whole board is okay with voting on this policy decision that is generally a board decision, then all the directors should vote on this decision. But if you're going to, you cannot act as a committee without calling the committee meeting.
Aaron, can we do this like in representation of executive session where we can ask those to leave that are not on that credential election committee at this time, since we're looking at a time frame now and we're all here, with executive session to ask those to leave that cannot participate? Is that allowed to do?
I think that you should convene a separate meeting. You could convene a separate meeting using you have notice procedures in your bylaws.
Okay, that was my question.
I would convene a separate meeting, and if you want to go by the book, which I thought that is kind of what you said in your motion, I think you should go by the book.
Okay.
So,
Mark, let me say something.
yes.
I'm Ron Bird from District 1. To me, $10 is minor to what we pay $37.50 every month.
I understand.
And I think Gordon said he has 7 meters. I have 2, and to me, this is a minor. That's my opinion.
But the $10 we give to come to the annual meeting. So you're going to get the $10 bill credit. The difference here is you're going to give it to somebody to vote rather than to come. That's really the main difference. You're going to incentivize people to vote rather than come to the meetings. That's what I said.
That would.
I agree with Suzanne because there's so many, when you move this to June, there's just a lot of people on a Friday night that can't come. And
I get
they
that.
got kids in sports or on vacation or whatever. I've talked to a lot of people also. I know it's $10, but $10 anymore is a lot for people. And, if you're spending money on everything else, you need to spend it on the members, I guess.
Prior to Friday evening meetings, when were they?
March.
Tuesday in March.
Yeah, March.
Tuesday evening in March?
Just a little historical, did we have more members at those meetings as compared to our ones we had? So we
Yes.
did have historically more members attend those meetings. Okay, good to know. So. Okay.
I just can't see, we're having a Friday night fiesta, spending thousands of dollars for like 200-300 people to come to this. I just can't see that. We had a meeting in March. People want something to do in March or something when nothing's going on. And I think, we could figure something else out instead of having something in June when it's nice weather and people don't have the time to do it.
That is something that can be looked into for sure. I don't, but so have to look at available dates and stuff like that. So, but I understand what you're saying there. Definitely. Yes.
So can we set a date then for that meeting? No?
That is not I'm not on that committee. So, that's not going to be something we set during this meeting. It'll get put out, I guess I can help coordinate that, but no, we're not going to take time to set that meeting or look at people's schedules and set that meeting right now.
Okay.
So, sorry. So, there is still a motion on the floor. So we either have to vote on it and as it was brought to the whole committee, the whole committee will vote on that one if we vote on it. And since it was a motion and seconded, we can either vote on it or table it.
Aaron, do you have a suggestion on the motion on the floor? Should they go ahead and vote on it or?
Well, it could also be withdrawn if you prefer to withdraw the motion.
So
I do not wish to withdraw.
Or you could amend the motion to, I think you had a 2-part motion. One was, let me back up. I want to make very clear here. The $10 credit issue, that is not a procedure that is.
No.
Hang on. It's not a procedure that is within section, the credentials and election committee duties. That is not a procedural matter about how the election is conducted. The $10 is a board decision. So that was one motion. And then there was another part of your motion, Suzanne, I think it was, can you refresh my?
It was just, I believe, Aaron, it was just a comment made on behalf of that motion to follow the bylaws of the 3.0607. My motion made to the board that Carl seconded was the $10 bill credit per vote received.
Okay, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. That issue, that decision is a board decision. That does not have to go to a committee. So you guys can entertain that motion tonight, or somebody can withdraw it, or somebody can move to table it. But anyways, that is a full board decision.
Thank you.
And the voting of it is then the directors that are coming up for elections do not vote on this?
No, all board members. She said it was none of that. It was all board members.
All board.
So we can vote tonight.
I'll be honest, and I understand that the $10, I feel bad paying for votes. I don't feel bad. I would gladly do a second event where we give bill credits to people to come to a different event.
Which is what we did last fall, correct?
Yeah, but I'd be fine with multiple events where we give bill credits, but I do not like paying for votes. That is my personal opinion. If bill credits to people for coming to a board meeting or another event, that's just me. I don't want to buy votes.
You can view it as paying for votes or view it for giving an incentive for people to participate. There's two different ways to look at it. I'm looking at it as incentive for people to participate. That's the way I'm looking at it, not paying for votes.
And I look at it the opposite way as you do.
I call the question. Let's vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So the motion fails. Okay. So I think moving still on with the nominating committee, we want at least, if we could line up a meeting with them and the company, you guys line that up with the nominating committee and our voting company. I'll link it on their name.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So to get that set up so we can get a better understanding of the voting process. Does that make sense? Okay. And then and in that process, make sure day of, and that's going, and I think we might have more questions or they'll be able to get their questions answered at that meeting. But my thought was, like Dale was saying, day of, we've got to make sure they have a chance to go through data. So what we're giving out. And I'd love to get back to where we have an annual meeting, on-site voting, that they can count those votes at least and help verify, but yes. So anything else on that? Did I miss one of the points? Those were the two big ones I took home that we needed to, and we can discuss after that has happened.
Right.
If you have other questions, please let us know.
I think that covers it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I think with that, we're going to move on then. Okay. Oh, Aaron, I think if that was the discussion we really wanted you here for, if you have other things you need to do, go ahead and thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me to be with you. And sorry we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but nice to see you all, and have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Okay, move on to the CEO update.
All right, so last month we worked on getting so you guys approved our 2021 goals, so we got those into our performance software. We're going to talk about the SBS.
Before we move on, so the board discussion of the SP contract will be left up to the Prudential and Election Committee also. Providing that to the nominating committee.
That's the SBC. That's the insurance trust.
I'm sorry,
That's SBS. This is SBC. That's the insurance.
Thank you.
Good. All right, so like I was saying, 2021 goals are in our system. We are working on we spent quite a bit of time going through our trust, the old IEC health insurance trust. So we're going to go through that tonight and kind of some of the options there. Continue working on our vision, strategic planning. We have basically 3 more events that we want to get done, which is a legal review, rate design, future rate design review, and then we're going to have our ops review to go through all of our metrics. To go through some of the monthly metrics. So last month was a little interesting. February, we were about 9.5 degrees cooler than our 5-year average. You can see it here. That's dramatic, right? Obviously, we had the February, what was it, 15th or 16th? And then if you look at the heating degree days, we were up about 28%, which basically, if you take a look at these two, it says we were really, really cold as far as a median, but it was only for a shorter period of time. It's basically what that's telling us. If you take a look at the energy, so this is purchase energy from Hoosier. We were above our 5-year average, about 5%. And then if you look at our demand, so demand is what everybody's been talking about because obviously that was the Texas issue. So from a demand standpoint, we were at 64,456 kW. So we were above our 5-year average, about 2.5%. One thing I think to note that is important is we were at 64, just like you see up here, 64,456 last year. It's a little bit higher this year. 64,267 was last year. Our overall peak was 3 or 5 years ago, between 3 and 5 years ago, and it was 68. So what that tells you is our demand really didn't hit ultra high compared to, our 3 to 5 year average. So I thought that was fairly interesting. And I think there's some reasons you're going to see here in a minute, or I'm going to talk about here in a minute that explains some of that. Next thing from an outage standpoint, so this is our TMED. Basically what TMED is anything that's a major storm or statistically different. You're going to see across this line up here. It's a TMED line and it's calculated every year based upon 10 years back. Anytime you see a blip that goes over that line, that's a major outage, right? So that's what we consider a major storm. We did have a blip here. This was a communication truck that ran off the road and hit a 3-phase pole when we were out. Had quite a few people out for I don't know how long it was, but that's where you see this blip here. Other than that, it's been really pretty quiet. Knock on wood or plastic, whatever. Another thing I wanted to mention, and we'll go into depth in this here in a minute, but if you saw the line loss obviously jumped up, and that's not real, right? So when we started looking into this, it has to do with something I'm going to talk about here in a minute, which is basically our Westport sub was off for the last 2 days, or AMR was down for the last 2 days, not the sub. AMR was down for the last 2 days. So there's 2 days worth of the entire sub's KWH that was basically out of the calculation. So line loss is Hoosier, what we buy on the numerator, and then what we sell in the denominator. So we were basically 2 days shy of all the KWH out of Westport. And I'll go through that here in just a minute. So that's why you see this. And what you'll see next month is this will go way, way low. Then what we'll do is we'll do some math to try to articulate what that would actually have been after 2 months. So anyways, I wanted to point that out because I saw this the first time and was like freaked out. And once we started kind of figuring out what makes sense, and you're going to see it in the financials also. Moving on, I'm going to hit the financials real quick. And we're early on the year, so there's not a whole lot to talk about here quite yet. So this is our balance sheet. Our assets went up about 425,000. Really, that's just due to our cash growing. So per our plan, our cash is going to grow until we get started on our work plan. So Brian gave us a copy of our or signed the contract through our contract company. That's going to kick off some construction. We'll probably start seeing, we won't see any by next month either, but we'll start seeing some invoices for construction probably in the next couple of months, and you'll see what that cash flow looks like. But that's really, that 9.5 is just mainly cash flow, or cash going up. We are under budget, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And again, we in construction projects. As far as our equities and liabilities, it's really, there's not much that's changed there. This is our income statement. Revenues were under budget and power costs follow, which they should if your rates are set right. Which left us with a gross margin to run the business on about $29,000 favorable, which is about 1.5%. Gross margin in this industry at hitting 1.5% is pretty good. So I think we were pretty happy with that. One thing I was talking about before, when I say revenues were under budget, you see these two numbers here. Reason being is Hoosier, after we had the very cold spell, they went around and did infrared testing on all their substations. And the reason is when you go from that cold to that, warmer temperatures that dramatically, it tends to stress some of this stuff. Another thing about doing heat vision like that is things will pop up. So they did all of our subs. They found a part in our Westport sub that was over 700 degrees, should be whatever temperature is out. And so they felt like it was an emergency. If that part would have blown, we would have had that entire sub out for over 17 hours. So they made the decision to do it. The problem is that's exactly when we were billing, right? So AMR is basically down when they were replacing that part because they brought a mobile in. So we lost 2 days. So any customer coming out of the Westport sub, we lost 2 days at the end of the month. So what that means is the KWH for those 2 days will move into next month's bills. So all of our financials are going to be showing. That's why, because I was pretty surprised that we weren't well over budget with it being as cold as it was. That's why this will bounce back by next month. And then the last thing to talk about on our financials is our controllable expenses are below budget amounts, primarily due to, the right of way is a lot of it, and that's just timing of our invoices. Our labor and benefits are down. Some of that is due to, the outages and the overtime, and a lot of it is due to the accounting and finance manager. We had budgeted for all year, obviously.
So with the AMR being down those 2 days, that's going to show up on members' bills.
Yeah, correct.
Where your bill's going to be a lot lower than
not a lot, but yes.
And then their March bill is going to be higher.
Correct.
So is it significant enough you need to communicate with those folks?
No, it's too.
Okay.
Yeah, this did happen last year at one point in time where they had to have the sub down. Actually, that one was
5 days.
Yeah, it was quite a bit bigger. We will hear about it. We will communicate it. And it's the Westport sub, so it's not the entire, but I think they made the right call. Unfortunately, typically we ask them not to do any type of work on the AMR out of the subs when we're billing because it's a system that you have to run then. You can't go back and do it. So unfortunate, but I'd rather that happen than to have an entire sub out for 17 hours.
Brad, approximately how many customers did that affect,
No, that is
just a rough idea. I'm not
I
looking.
feel like it was like 1,800.
It's an entire sub.
Close to 2,000.
It's enough to show in the financials and the KWH sales. So, and that's why that line loss was like that. All right, next is our cash flow. So if you start at the very top, we started the month with 1.8. We basically took in 3 and we sent out 2.4, left us with 2.39, which was an increase of 543,000. I did mention something about accounts payable last month. And the differences went down from like 397, I think is what we reported, down to 82, which is typical. So wanted to point that out. But other than that, cash flow, you're going to see a chart of what it looks like. We plan on that is growing. We have, actually, Jenny came to me this morning and said, can we go ahead and swipe some more to our investments? So we did. I'm going to go through the rest of the metrics, but I'm going to go through them pretty quick. So stop me if you have any questions. There's just not a whole lot to talk about. There's the sales of KWH that we've been talking about. 5-year trend is the black line. The red line is our budget. The green line is our actuals. Higher cost obviously followed it down. Gross margins are right on budget. And it's so close on cumulative that you can't see the line. On this chart, the only thing I wanted to note on this one was, if you remember last month, this number right here, which is our total KWH to budget, was like 3.8 and we're at 2.13. So it's under the budget, but it's better here. I think once we get through those 2 days I was talking about from the Westport sub, we'll be really close to budget on sales. Now to dig into the controllable expenses a little bit. And what I try to hit up on this chart is why the gap and then where do we expect to end the year at, knowing what we know now. Pretty early in the year, so it's hard to kind of do that, but we're going to take our best shot here. So starting with A and G, not much of a difference. Really what it is it's labor and then it's the accounting and finance manager not being in there. We believe we'll be within 2%. This is all going to depend on the timing we make the hire, at what salary we make the hire, honestly, and then what happens to overtime and things like that. So we expect to be within 1 to 2% of what the budget. We do expect it to be under budget by the end of the year, but probably not a whole lot. And it's all dependent on what happens with overtime and what happens with when we hire. Corporate relations and billing, we're right at budget and we expect to end those right at budget. Maintenance, I talked about it a minute ago. This is really being driven by right away. And it's being driven by our labor and benefits. As you know, some of our guys bounce back and forth right here. So it's a guessing game every year of what department they're actually going to be using. So right now they're not as much in here. Some of that's driven from outage numbers being down. We expect this to be about 1.23 under budget to flat, basically at budget. So right now, none of these we're expecting to be over budget. And then again, on operations, we expect it to be flat. So if we look at this as end of year, I say it's an LE, but what do we expect to be as far as controllable expenses? Our best guess right now is 1.25% under in controllable expenses. Again, that can change tonight, actually, with the weather coming in. Plant investments. Not much going on in plant investments. We've got everything planned out. We've got our contract now signed. Stuff will start to fly now as soon as, it was a brand new contract we'd never seen before. So we had some legal work going through there and we had some negotiations getting through that contract. It is complete now. So once we get that done, we'll probably start seeing, and again, we probably won't see invoices until this time frame here, which will show up in cash flow right here. So this is our cash flow. Again, we expect our cash flow to climb. We'll start seeing invoices right around in here, probably this time frame. That's our best guess. It could be out a little bit later. That obviously dives your cash down. This is your 5-year average. Right now, our best guess is around August is when we'll start drawing on our loan for the construction work. And that's the financials. Questions on any of that? It's actually knock on wood that it's not going to change tonight.
Any questions on anything you went over?
You want to do the 990 thing?
I've talked, if you have your 990 forms, could you please, that I gave you last, you already turned
Yes, I thought I left my last one, but
there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you that haven't turned them in. So if you could leave those, if not, just get them to me sometime within the next month or two so that I have them in hand before I file the forms.
The only major thing that I left out on the project updates, and if anybody has any questions from the project updates, the main thing, Crystal, you want to give an update on the lobby?
So we will be finished with phase 1, middle of next week. They're coming to do the windows Monday and Tuesday. And then we'll be wrapped up in here. They're going to give us a couple of days to shift. Jenny's working from the drive-through right now, so they're going to shift her back to her station, move Becky back, and then we're going to be starting phase 2. So we'll close the drive through at that point, open the lobby back up. It'll probably take a couple, 2 to 3 weeks, and then we'll be open back up for good. We're doing a really, really good job, I think.
Any feedback from members? Favorable, unfavorable?
Usually they're just like, what are you doing? And then once she explains, they're like, oh, it looks so nice.
The major thing I've seen, Dale, is it's really showing us the problem with the drive-through. Because everybody's going through the drive-through and trying to get out of a truck and hand stuff through.
Well, the other day we had a little older gentleman come through and it was pouring down raining and he couldn't reach. And so he tucked it in and it flew out because it was windy. He got out of his truck and he had to get down on his knees to get, because it flew under his truck. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go out because I thought he was I didn't think he was going to get back up off of the ground. But he finally did. But I'm like, this is why we need to fix this drive-through. All we needed was him to fall down and break something. But yeah, it's progressing and I think it looks really nice. So if you guys get a chance, you can walk over and check it out.
Good.
That's all we have for the CEO update and the financials.
And on the educational, a lot about Texas and what's going on there and Hoosier's response to questions on if stuff like this could happen in our area. Big thing I think I read it right is Hoosier doesn't think we're in the same predicament that Texas.
So does anyone object if I just give my Hoosier report right now so we can talk about it?
Yeah, go for it.
I had this slide put in. We talked, this is really a bad, you can't really see the outline of the US apparently, but anyway.
Which is interesting because if you look at my screen, it's pretty clear. Sorry.
Anyway, so we've talked a lot about MISO in the past and our participation in MISO. MISO's in the green, obviously. So if you look at Texas, non-RTO, they don't participate in the regional transmission system. Their interconnect is also very bad. They continue to operate sort of as an island. So when the storm hit, almost half their generation failed because of cold weather. Without the interconnects in place, they didn't have any backup. We are connected to PJM on the east. There were 30,000 megawatts of power flowing into MISO from PJM to avoid blackouts here because we were close. That was a big, huge draw. That Texas deal was a huge draw. So, we've talked about, MISO's not that important to me. Well, it is important. And that's part of the reason we didn't have a problem like Texas had. Could it happen here? Yes, but certainly not to that extent that happened in Texas. They had prices as high as $9,000 megawatt when that hit. And they are a free choice. You can get your power from whoever you want in Texas. So that has driven the market to not build new capacity, to not maintain plant. So yeah, those folks have been having really, really low bills, but some of them had some really high bills. I'm sure you've heard about some of that. But that's because the market dictated that they couldn't afford to spend, they couldn't recoup those costs. So they have not been investing in plant. That's kind of the shorthand version of what happened down there. During that event, Miram Station, the coal-fired plant, there's 2 generators there, 2 500 megawatt generators. One of them went down during that event, boiler tube. So, it can happen. The Hoosier's very vulnerable and they realize that. And that's why we're trying to diversify with having 2 large generators in the same location. If something happens there, we could have an issue. But we did have a failure. They managed through it. But there definitely are some lessons and some actions to be taken out of the events that happened in Texas. They had to initiate those blackouts because if the system goes completely down, it will be months, if not weeks, to get things back up because you're gonna have damaged equipment that you're not gonna be able to replace quickly. So they did what they had to do. I'm sure they didn't want to, but they tried to salvage what they could. So We had an operations committee at operations committee meeting at Hoosier last week. This is primarily what was discussed. We have not had a board meeting since our last board meeting. That is next Monday.
Any other questions for Jason since we're on these articles in particular specifically? Okay. We'll move on to the disconnects.
So I'll talk about this and Crystal's here too if you got questions. So basically on disconnects, if you read our tariffs today, it basically has the same blurb under temporary service for commercials and for single phase. So both small, medium, large, and then same thing for single phase. And basically what it says is a seasonal disconnect. So if you seasonally disconnect, then that is considered a temporary service. And if you read above it, if you have a temporary service, if you want to disconnect, we're gonna basically charge you everything but material. That's what it says in there. Now, past practice has been, we will let members in single phase disconnect. You have to pay a disconnect fee, but then seasonally, but then we do not commercial. So what I went through and did was, I think, what the justification of why that is. And really what it is single phase accounts, and I gave you guys can see all the numbers here. It's basically it's not really impactful as far as what the subsidy is. So in other words, if Dale disconnects his house or his 1 grain bin on single phase for 6 months, that $37 service piece, the $37 that we charge as a service fee, those are fixed costs that we don't have to sell. If we don't sell 1 kWh, we still have cost. So that's what the $37 covers. It recovers those fixed costs. So in theory, if Dale disconnects for 6 months, he's avoiding that $37 fixed cost for 6 months, which means somebody else is picking it up. The idea is there's not a lot of these over the 7,884 folks on it. And it just is impactful because there's so many people that it's spread over across for single phase. You get into small commercial, medium commercial, and large commercial, it's a little bit different of an animal because you don't have near as many people and their average bills are completely different. So I think if you look at why the past practice has always been single phase will allow, commercial we won't, is because the impact or the subsidy is really not impactful in single phase, but it can be in a commercial. And that's why we don't allow commercial accounts, but we do single. Our recommendation is let's do what we do, let's keep past practice going, but monitor it. If you obviously get, 500 people or 500 members out of the 7,884 members in single phase, well, then you may want to do something different.
Mike, do you know how long this practice has been going on?
I've been here for 14 years and it's been that long.
Okay. So I just want to make sure it's not something last 5 years or
Long time.
long time. Okay.
I missed that. How many disconnects did you have last year? Like
Single phase 50 out of 7,884. That's what makes it insignificant, Carl.
That's minimal.
That's why there's so many to spread it across that it's really not impactful. But if you look at a commercial, it can be.
Crystal, do most of those have collars?
No,
Oh,
no, because they're, back in the day when we put collars on, we did them by, were they going to be up for disconnect,
Right.
for non-pay? So we chose who got a collar based on that. And most of those accounts, those type of accounts. So
You have
them.
folks that are going to disconnect. Does it make sense to have a collar so you do it from here and don't have to send anybody else?
yeah, we've been talking about that.
And since we've been ordering, that's all we order now is disconnect. The disconnect is inside the meter. It's just one device. So any meter that we order now, the disconnect is inside of it. So if you get a new meter that's single phase, you're going to have the option to disconnect it anyway.
Is it the same 50 year after year?
Yeah.
Do they
A
put
lot of them are like,
50 that was all, do they come back on?
Yeah, yes. Right, the average is 6 months.
Yeah, well, it's.
Yeah.
It's so green in January, September, they put it.
Quite honestly, there's not as many, there's not
those, and then you have like campgrounds.
seasonal house.
A lot of campgrounds and cabins that people aren't going to use for a little bit, for the majority.
When we did this analysis, I was actually really surprised. I thought it'd be over 50. Crystal guessed 40 and she wasn't very far
Like,
off.
I bet it's 40.
So what do you think? Which option do you like, Carl? To keep it the way it is?
Oh. I mean, I don't think we even have to.
You guys don't necessarily have to make a decision. Sometimes I think we do. But this is the first time you've seen the data. So if you want to just discuss it, it's up to you.
I'm with Carl, leaving it alone. If we need to make an official decision, we can make it next month or in the future, but do you guys want it?
I just think it would be nice to clean it up.
We got to clean it up.
Okay, you guys want it?
What we do today so that we're not technically breaking a policy.
Okay. I understand that also.
If you want to just leave it alone, option 1 is your answer. We'll scratch that. I think that is.
I think so. That looks right to me. Suzanne, do you have any thoughts on this one? Preference one way or the other? Jason? Ryan?
Is there any action if they do? We'd have to scratch that.
Yeah, we'd have to make the motion to scratch that from tariff.
I'd make that motion. Just want to ask everybody.
Okay, Jeff? Go for it. Dale, I'm good. How about Steve's online? Did you want to make the motion, Brian? Okay. Making the motion, using option 1, scratching the last sentence.
I'll second.
Carl? All in favor?
Aye.
Is that oppose or for, Steve?
That was 4.
Okay.
You must come in late.
It did. So, okay, that's taken care of. Next, we have 2 possible budget amendments. The first one is easements. And if I remember right, it's been, I don't know how many years you've said.
They're all over the board, but on average 13 years
Okay,
ago.
so for some reason, easements weren't, and to get caught up with them, we would need to go to the courthouse and pay the fees. Dale?
Well, I'm not so concerned about the reason as I am concerned that we have something in place to prevent this from occurring going forward.
Yes, we're actually
I'm
thinking.
not worried about finger pointing, but I am inclined to say that the board should never have to address this issue again.
I completely agree. So I did do some digging, and I'm not going to point fingers. What I'm going to tell you is at one certain point in time, resources were stretched. This was deprioritized. It was kind of one of them deals where, we're going to pay the 8,000, whether it's over the last 10 years or over 1 year. So it was deprioritized. The idea of the process, what we're thinking, Crystal doesn't probably know this yet because we have a meeting set up next Tuesday, but we're going to try to make it part of. So today we have a work order process, and you got to do certain steps before you can actually close the work order. The idea is to take the human element out of this and say, you're not closing the work order until this section is done, which could be the easement being recorded. So we don't have that completely ironed out to answer your question, Dale, but we're going to make sure this stays. Some co-ops do it quarterly, some co-ops do it yearly, some co-ops do it every month. It really just kind of depends on how you want to do it. Now, I think one thing to note from the memo that I said was easements are good. If, we get an easement done when we do a new service and it gets put in a pile, and it has been that way for a while, right? So those easements that those original people have not moved, So in other words, the name that's on the easement is the person that's still living though. There's a good easement still. It's not like we wasted any of those. There are going to be a handful that we're going to have to go through and re-easement because the person has moved. Crystal's folks are going to go through those. So to answer your question, I think we've got a pretty good idea of what we're going to do. We're going to make it part of the process, but it's not been completely ironed out. I got to tuck Crystal into it.
What department would that fall under? Just out of curiosity.
If the actual doing the easements, it's
Obviously not Crystal's, but she's shaking her head.
Don't look at me.
And that's exactly my,
I'm just curious. I have no idea. What department would that fall under?
it's like an engineering function basically.
somebody within this organization, that should be in their function.
Is it somebody that's new in this school?
No, it was basically put off because of stretch of resources and the fact that you got to prioritize something, and the decision was made at the point in time to deprioritize this.
It might fall in my department too.
Sounds like it might need to. It might need to.
Probably gonna fall into my department.
Trying to work with that.
341 is a big number, no matter what you're talking about.
Future is.
Talking about just the $25 recording fee, is that correct?
For 641 of them, yes.
Right, but so the paragraph at the top of the second page references a survey.
That's no, I'm not sure what it is.
We don't have any costs associated with that? No. Or is that's all, the surveys are all done?
Correct. Everything that has to be done is done other
The exception of the recording.
on the deed. Yeah.
About the cost for legal.
The cost for legal, I mean, that's just an overall legal function. I mean, we do legal stuff every day, right?
I mean, is there additional costs?
Oh, no.
Because it's on here, I reached out to legal to understand the impact. So I'm sure there was a cost.
We get legal stuff every day. Not every day, but I'd say 3 times a week.
Hey, Brett, you said there are 341 recordings, I think. But if there was a change in a member's name, wouldn't there really be more than that potentially?
No, so what we would do is, so let's say I've got an easement for Dale again, and Dale moved. I will have to go to the new owners of Dale's place. I'll throw away the old one. I'll get a
So
new
you
one.
wouldn't have. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I got
No,
it.
we wouldn't record the old one. We would just throw it away.
That's what I wondered, if that had to be done. So I understand. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And then on those, as long as a new owner agrees to it, they have to agree to it then, or?
I don't know that they have to agree to it.
Okay. Okay.
Typically with easements, we really don't have any problems. I mean, it's usually just an easement for I know in the last 4 years I've been here, we really haven't had a person say, I'm not going to sign an easement or I'm not going to give you an easement. But typically you're doing it at new service too. So who's worried about an easement when they need electricity to their house for the first time? This is no different than any other thing that I've investigated it internally. We've got some things put in place. We're working on a fix long term.
Okay. So is this one we want to take action on this month or wait till next month and do it? I think.
I don't think you really have a whole lot of choice.
Yeah, I think we've got to do it.
I think I'll make the motion to file the easements.
I'll second. Got that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Was that opposed or? I'll wait a little longer until I say opposed, Steve.
No, it wasn't. I was not opposing.
I know. Yeah. Okay. So easements is taken care of. The second one is the vision and strategy facilitator.
Yeah, so this one, so what we did was, and actually we started this when Eric was here, we built some criteria, evaluation criteria. Basically, what were we looking for out of this vision strategic process, right? We interviewed, I think it ended up being about 6 folks that we actually interviewed, and, you know, we kind of ranked them. Then we got bids from the best ones. And then we kind of landed on, well, what's the best option for us? So Brian Singletary's, I don't know if any of you have had training with him. He's been in the industry for 30 or 40 years, sorry. He's a very strong facilitator. He understands the industry and he has a strong process. A lot of the other ones, I mean, honestly, back in the day, strategic planning in this industry was kind of something you had to do and check the box. So you sit in a room, you do strengths and weaknesses, and you finish it, right? This is probably one of the most important things that we're doing for our members in the next year is this long-term, what do we want to be in 10 years? There's some forks in the road that we've got to navigate. We got to start planning for now. So I believe he's a strong facilitator. I believe he's got a very strong process, and he's very well worth those dollars to lead us into creating a vision and truly understanding and planning out what our future is going to look like. Because again, this whole industry is changing, and this is probably one of the most important things that we're all going to be doing in the next year. So that's the process that we went through, and that's kind of who we landed on.
So, this will set the stage for what we do in the next 10 years. Like I said, strong facilitator. I've had him in class. I thought he was very good.
Is his availability coordinated with open dates?
Yeah. I mean, I've already talked to him about a little bit of as far as timing. He can definitely meet the timing that we were hoping for this year. But we will definitely have to coordinate through he's going to be one of there's going to be 9 people to coordinate with.
Any thoughts on this?
And I made the comment before, I think it'd be not to not have them do additional training. I think a CFO involved with the board would be valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
I think having a CFO with us that's hired, a new CFO along with us, once that hiring is complete, I think that would be valuable to have a CFO sitting in here with us during it.
For strategic planning?
Or the training.
This is strategic planning. This isn't the training.
But I mean, for all this with him, with Brian's signature, I think it would be, I think I would value having a CFO involved.
Yeah.
Especially if we're getting a new CFO someday.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that this should not occur before that position.
I agree.
We cannot do strategic planning without having this position.
I think this training also would be valuable to have us with the CFO, a new hired CFO, you know.
Yeah. But I think you're talking about a different training, Suzanne.
I'm talking about the facilitation proposal for purchasing energies. I just think having a CFO in any of this training for long-term planning, financial goals would just be valuable to us and get our money's worth, honestly, for to spend $8,000 to have a CFO that's going to be higher. I don't think we should schedule that until Brett has selected his CFO in place.
We're not scheduling it, are we?
I'm not going to schedule strategic planning until we have the CFO. We're just saying that funds are fine. Yeah. These dates on here are just dates that we kind of talked about.
Okay.
I got to schedule that with all you. And Suzanne, I'm 100%. There's no way I'm going to strategic long-term stuff unless we have someone in the position ready to go.
Okay. Does that answer that question then, Suzanne? Okay. Steve, do you have any thoughts? I haven't asked you yet.
Trying to figure out how to unmute myself on occasion. No, I mean, I concur with having a CFO available at the time, but I think, going forward, we need to, and I don't remember having Brian as a leader before, but it's probably been the case. I'm sure he does a good job.
What? Okay.
Oh, Brian.
BS.
Okay. Yeah, this is not the same guy.
Okay. Very simple. Carl, do you have any strong feelings on this?
I'm saying
Just as long as so what I think I'm hearing, unless someone else is, I think we move forward. I would entertain a motion to approve these funds so that so we can set this up when we have
and we just table until they get a CFO, and then we know where we're going.
This is just to lock this guy in for that meeting.
Yeah.
And then we can schedule it later.
So. I mean, tabling it's an option, but my preference would be to make a motion to set it so that we can go ahead and have this, so that when we have the CFO, we can get the dates locked in. We don't have to wait for approval of this. That
We
would
can't really lock in dates.
Huh?
We can't lock in dates.
Until CFO, exactly. But I would like to have the approval that when we have the CFO, we can spend this money and then we can lock in dates before we have to, the next board meeting. That's my preference.
Like putting the cart before a horse.
So.
I guess I don't understand that comment, Carl. Why?
Well, it just seems like you're going to spend money before you even have anything to do with it. But I know you want to do this, but I mean, if this guy says he can't do these here, or something happens, we can't do it, and then we have the money sitting there, but we should be doing something else, so not even borrowing.
We're only going to use this money for this. You're only approving this for this facilitator. If waiting till the CFO or accounting and financial manager is done, just make it contingent on that. I mean, I completely 100% agree.
He wouldn't be paid until after.
Until it's conducted. Well, my concern becomes is if you don't act upon it, his availability is going to shrink because he's not going to keep 17 potential dates there. Might want to engage him. Don't think I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I can't imagine that.
Well, I think he said he could, do some pre-work. I mean, if you guys approve this tonight, he could probably do some pre-work. I'm not saying next week, but he could start doing some pre-work prior to us even setting a date. That might be the only advantage I can think of.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposal with the dates to be determined.
Correct.
And I'll second that.
Comments on that? Questions? Concerns? Does that make sense to you, Carl, or not?
Well, still not make. That's what I'm thinking, anyway, so go ahead. And go on.
Okay. So, anybody else? Okay, all in favor? All opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. Okay, our next topic is just a quick review of the REMC Trust. There's a talked about just a little bit earlier. They approved grants for $13,700 to, what is it? About 8 or 9 different organizations. So that's what the Operation Roundup has done. It's great for the community. So questions on this?
Just what's the cumulative amount? Does anybody know?
Yes.
Rachel? How long has that been in place and what's the cumulative amount?
Since the 90s. Let me pull the spreadsheet. Since 1999, we've awarded 276 grants totaling over $517,000.
Do you easily know how many 276 grants covered, how many different organizations?
Yes,
actually track all that. And that's
Sure there's,
they have.
there's some repeat,
There is.
sure there is.
One 111 different organizations. $276 total. 111 different organizations.
What I've seen, Dale, since I've been here is you have a board, right? The trust board, and they typically don't want to give to the same folks, it seems like a little bit. But then when it rotates, sometimes they'll have new, fresh, that's how you see some of the doubles.
So, any other questions on that? Okay. So then we're going to move on to policy review on policy 3-3. This is, I was going to say, this is to bring policy 3.3 more in line with the bylaws.
So I was basically going through, so we try to put 1, 2, or 3, depending on the time that we have left in a board meeting to review old policies. And I usually just go by the dates that the last time it was reviewed. Well, since we got into this whole review of the statement of nominating committee stuff, I thought it was appropriate for us to take a look at that. And it needs some updates to be in, bylaws are obviously the governing document. But this policy should follow it. So these were the recommended changes that Wickens gave us. I don't know that you necessarily need to approve it tonight, although that's the review these were his red lines.
Did anybody survey any of the nominating committee to get their input?
This is just to comply with what the bylaws that you guys approved are. So I guess to answer that question, no.
If the election committee is going to meet,
I just think
this be reviewed with them? Could this be reviewed with?
Oh, I totally agree. I just think that this is very poor to try to change a bylaw and a policy in the middle of the election, especially without their input. So yes, Jason, I'd love to discuss this with the nominating committee.
And we don't have to change this one right now. I mean, the bylaws are the governing document. I question too whether we should even change it at this point.
No, the election. Yes, you're talking with the nominating committee in that same meeting. So get it there.
Okay.
So you're talking, I just didn't know if you wanted to call a separate meeting, just the nominating committee, but you had for.
I really don't care. I think it's only fair to ask the nominating committee their input.
Yeah.
And then we can make our decision based on.
You do it at the election
Well,
committee.
that's what Jason.
I thought it was a good time. That's what you're agreeing with it. Okay.
I just want to make sure they have input.
I thought you were suggesting a separate meeting from what he said.
No.
That was my confusion.
So the input I'm getting is we put Wickens' suggestions on review for later, either
After discussion.
after discussion. I'm good with that. So. Okay. Okay, move on then.
No hometown.
Yep, no hometown. Jason already gave his report unless he wants to add anything. Steve, do you have anything for us?
No, nothing new from IEC.
We have a board meeting coming up.
Okay.
Right, next month, yeah.
Okay. Did anybody do any training? I know this past week there was the conference. I wasn't able to go.
I did March 11th, the CCD 3640, the financial decisions management, the virtual meeting out of Ohio.
How'd it go?
That was good. They kept referring me as to the only non-Buckeye the entire time, but it was fine. I was the only one. I was the only non-Buckeye. It was interesting. It would have been nice to gone through something like that in the first 60 or 90 days because it actually went over the financials and kind of how you can evaluate backwards and determine what, how we get to this money and the cash flow, and basically went over our whole section 8, the financial update, went through the entire board packet and dissected that. That would have been helpful in the first 90 days versus some of the classes. Not that they weren't valued, but that would have been more significantly taken advantage. They did talk about a lot of the debt and the long-term debt. Most of the questions were regarding capital credits. Majority of the questions that came in, they opened up the questions the last, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Capital credits, some were like, are we required to pay them back? Are we not required to pay them back? It was interesting just to hear the questions that some of the other directors were entertaining going forward. So it was probably one of my better ones I've attended.
I really
online. I mean, online and or live.
The comment you made, I would also highly recommend to any new directors that that's one that they should try to get. Like you said, in the first, as quick as you can. I remember when I took it, it was actually a 2-day, I think.
Yeah,
but I got a lot out of that one.
So one interesting thing too is that there's a lot of legal work going on across the country on capital credits right now. I think that's probably why you see a lot of the questions. And it's really based around the co-ops that don't give much capital credits back. So we're in a good spot when it comes to that.
So, anybody else do any training?
I did participate with the director's conference training. There were some things that caught my eye as far as topics. It was okay. It is tough to do those types of conferences with virtual, but there was some EV stuff and there was some good information there. It was from 11 to 5, I think, 2 days. But boy, do I miss being in person and having the connections. You miss all that. They try to do some networking stuff, but it's just hard to do virtual.
Okay. Anybody else do anything? Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session. Second. Well, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you guys for coming.